recording?
No. So the gospel is Luke 9:11 through 17, and I need a reader, no?
Yeah. Gospel according to Luke. Jesus spoke to the crowds about the kingdom of God, and he healed those who needed to be cured. As the day was drawing to a close, the 12 approached him and said, "Dismiss the crowd, so that they can go to the surrounding villages and farms, and find lodging and provisions, for we are in a deserted place here." He said to them, "Give them some food yourselves." They replied, 5 loaves and 2 fish are all we have, unless we ourselves go and buy food for all these people. Now the men, there numbered about 5,000. Then he said to his disciples, "Have them sit down in groups of about 50. They did so and made them all sit down. Then, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing over them, broke them, and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. They all ate and were satisfied. And when the leftover fragments were picked up, they filled 12 wicker baskets. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So Jesus is doing what he normally does. He's preaching, he's healing, he's casting out demons. And so apparently they've been doing this the whole day. And so the day was drawing to a close, so it was probably starting to, like the sun was going down pretty good. And he said, dismiss the crowd, because there's no McDonald's around here or Holiday Inns. I mean, there was nowhere. I mean, when you think about it, we take all this stuff for granted, but there would have been no food. I mean, you're in the desert. You're just sitting out there in a deserted place, and that kind of makes you think of the wilderness, the Egyptians in the desert wandering for years. And so that kind of is in the background. But they're being kind of practical. They're saying, well, we should probably dismiss them so that they can get something to eat. And go find you, for this is a deserted place here. Jesus says to them, give them some food yourselves.
I know, that's funny.
And that's kind of amazing. I'm like, well, where are you going to pull that out of? Pull it out of your hat, which is exactly it's exactly what he's going to do. And they replied, 5 loaves and 2 fish are all we have. And it was probably sarcastic. Yeah, well, I got 5 loaves and 2 fish. But there's 5,000 men, so there's probably 20,000 people when you add the wives and their kids, a minimum 2 kids. I mean, could have been 50,000, because it wasn't like these days where you have 1 or 2 kids. They had lots of kids. And so 5 loaves and 2 fish are all we have, unless we ourselves are to go buy food for all these people. And so what is Jesus doing? He's kind of telling them, this kind of prefigures what the priests are going to do, right? There's the feeding, there's this apostolic mission and priestly mission. So we're to participate in feeding, the people. And that's what every priest does, right? He's feeding us spiritually with the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus.
If they were going to go buy food for all these people, all the people that would have been bearing it are in the crowd as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of an impossibility. I mean, this is a lot of people. So they only had a few things. And so then he said to his disciples, have them sit down in groups of about 50. And so that's kind of interesting, too. That's kind of like almost like a military. I kind of think, okay, again, these groups here and there. But Jesus kind of bringing this order to the chaos of the crowd. I mean, he's having them all group in a different order. And St. Augustine said, the multiplications of the loaves signals the abundance of grace in the Eucharist, and that's exactly what happens. So they did so they obeyed, and they all sat down, and then taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing over them, broke them, and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. They all ate and were satisfied. So from these 5 loaves and 2 fish, 50,000 people got fed. I mean, this is just amazing. But again, we have the taking, the blessing, the breaking, and the giving. I mean, there's like this formula. It happens at each Mass, right? And we have this. So this is all prefigured through the Old Testament, the Psalms, the New Testament, the readings, and also in the Gospel. God's food is perfect. It's satisfying. I think that's the other point here. they were all ate and they were satisfied. They weren't hungry after that. And you can imagine, that's probably a lot of food. These people weren't...
50,000.
Yeah, 50,000 people eating to their fill. So I'm thinking they're not going to have a little sardine. They're probably going to have... this would have been the best food. It's heavenly food. So God's not going to get junk. It was the best bread they ever had. It was probably the best fish they ever tasted. So you're going to want as much as you can get of that, right? It's not, it's not like you're going to get something that's all burnt and tasteless and garbage. It's probably the tastiest food they've ever had because it came from God, right? It's
You fill the baskets.
Yeah, and when they were done, the leftover fragments were picked up and they filled 12 wicker baskets, that kind of symbolizes the 12 tribes, but also the reverence that we have for the Eucharist, right? We use a paten so that everything is kept. That's the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. So every fragment contains the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. And that's why typically we'll be on our knees, because we worship as we believe, right? That's why they have the kneelers. And that's why it's so important that this is what we believe, and we worship that way. St. Thomas Aquinas says, you worship how you believe. That's why we're on our knees, we're reverent, we're prayerful, because we believe that this is Jesus truly present. And it just comes out. We can't help it. That's what we believe. And so I think that's kind of interesting that this also, God in the wilderness, Jesus, he did this feeding, when they were wandering, and he gave them the bread from heaven. Jesus gives us the bread from heaven, the true bread from heaven, which is his body and his blood. And if you go into John 6, why did he do this? Because the apostles asked, they said, give us this food always. And he did, right? He gave us this food always. We have this continual, there's this once and for all sacrifice that we participate in. And that's what's amazing too. So I guess there's a few things that I wanted to point out. So the Eucharist entails recalling the dramatic context of the Last Supper, the night of Jesus' betrayal. And we're participating in that, right? So we're participating in that. Second, the foundational elements of the Eucharist are what? The bread and the wine, right? We talked about that again and again. There's the thanksgiving. I mentioned that earlier about the Eucharist. So Eucharisto in Greek. Fourth, the bread is symbolically broken, which sustains the memorial of Christ being broken for humanity on the cross. So these are all the things that we see. There's this broken, Jesus' body was broken. He was beaten, he was beaten nearly to death, and so much so that he was,
They pulled his sockets out.
Yeah, but no bones were broken, but he was just brutalized. And so this whole celebration is a remembrance. We understand that we're participating in the singular event of the Last Supper, Christ's passion, death, and resurrection. And so this is a very important feast. And if you have a chance to go to a procession or just take some time in adoration, and just remember when you're going to Mass this weekend that's what we're participating in, because we don't want to take it for granted. And they actually, they call it, when you receive Jesus the last time before you die, they call it the viaticum, which is the food for the journey. Food for the journey, and that journey is, when we die. But if you are in purgatory, you'll be longing for the Eucharist. You'll remember. That's why you never take it for granted. It's so important that we really recognize that what we're receiving, the body, blood, soul, and divinity, and the amount of graces you can get are infinite. The only limit is us. St. Thomas Aquinas said, from one Eucharist, you are receiving Jesus, full divinity. He's divine, right? We're receiving him, and his blood is in our blood, but we're limited by our disbelief and our lack of faith. And so, that's why, Lord, help my unbelief, right? And that's what the one guy said, I believe, help my unbelief. And so when we receive, we should say, Lord, let me receive all the graces that you have intended for me. That's another prayer we should be doing. And it's good when he elevates the host that, I mean, one thing I usually do is I say, my Lord and my God. And I usually say it loud enough so people hear, just because people might be thinking about the ball game or something else, and it's just, we're there and this is present. And I think it's important that we recognize this is Jesus.
Don't you teach it to us?
Well,
I
Rick.
just don't know that.
Well, I know, and that's why the catechism that people have is kind of poor. And so I know, because over the years, that's why I went through the catechism twice here. I mean, from front to, end, because so many people didn't really understand the catechism.
I've referenced that book quite a few times. They gave me the catechism book.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's the little one. I mean, the newer one is like 4 times the length. And so that's kind of something to keep in mind too.
We go through the catechism here?
We did.